I'm bumping Daniels from Western Command to Colonel, giving him CID and carte blanche to fix the investigative units.
Cedric Daniels?
Problem?
No, he's good police. He's just got a little independent streak.
Independent from who?
I got no problem making Daniels. What else do you need?
That's it for now.
Mr. Mayor, about Irvin. If you don't mind my asking, why keep him as a puppet commissioner when you can just fire the guy?
We mind you asking.
Alex Cottrell and Toby Huntingford present Caught on the Wire. This podcast is an episode-by-episode analysis of HBO's widely acclaimed TV series about the city of Baltimore, its people, and its many problems. Find more information about the show and all the episodes online at caughtonthewire.wordpress.com. Hey there, welcome back to Caught on the Wire. It's Season 4, Episode 9, Know Your Place, and I'm here with Toby Huntingford once again, ready to take on what is now, getting into the final quarter of Season 4. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, good. We've got a nice, fairly slim recap this week for anyone who's been becoming disillusioned with the crazy density of these episodes. So, yeah, I'm feeling good.
And we, I suppose we both shared a certain TV-related interest, was this week, wasn't it? This week gone, or last week? Because we're both interested in The Apprentice, the UK version.
Oh, yeah.
I do feel like it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure, but I just like the format of the show. It has become a bit of a caricature over the years, and it's like Season 1 of The Apprentice is, I still think, brilliant. I still think it's really interesting.
Oh yeah, it was completely sort of genuine feeling show back then, all about the business.
It's really, really long takes. There's, it's really muted editing. It's not it's not trying too hard to force a particular narrative or whatever. It's just letting things happen. And the characters aren't like just I'm going to beat everybody and blah blah blah. And it's just like nobody feels like a normal human being. They're just like hyper business robots.
No, what the show's still got though is it's always got a really funny narrative all the way through. And everything is quite well done in terms of comedy, so it still manages to make me laugh quite a lot, and people are very good at making fools of themselves. And the judges are gradually becoming these pantomime characters, which I have to appreciate on a slightly different level from how I used to appreciate them, but, it makes them extra funny. So, and
it's they've become sort of centre stage characters now. They used to be just there to add little comments here and there, but now they are characters unto themselves, to a really exaggerated degree, just like the candidates. Certainly.
And of course, a lot of our US listeners will probably be able to relate. The Apprentice is very big over in the States as well.
But the US version, I'm sorry, but it's terrible.
With Trump, right?
Just awful.
No,
it's unwatchable. It's actually, it's one of those like reality TV shows, especially like, say for example, the difference between Kitchen Nightmares, Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, which I love. The UK version is excellent. I really like that show. Gordon Ramsay, I have a lot of respect for that guy. I actually think he's really, really, really good chef and a really smart business guy, and obviously a really good media personality and everything. The American version is unwatchable. It's horrible. I'm sorry, it's just awful. It's so over-edited, and it's just sound effect after sound effect, wall-to-wall music.
It's sort of lost
constantly
all
trying
sense
to
of
build
pace.
tension.
Yeah.
Oh, we're relaxed now, and lots of tension again. Oh, look, he's getting angry, and then Gordon Ramsay will be like 10 times more angry than he would ever normally get. And it's like, what even is this? This is just absurd.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh well, do check out the British one if you guys want to see a little change.
If you want to see actual reality TV, then British versions of Kitchen Nightmares and The Apprentice, certainly in this instance, are slightly closer to reality. Still not perfect. It is a bit of a shame about The Apprentice because Season 1 is so good, but like you say, it's still funny, and it's larger than life nature has just allowed you to enjoy it for different reasons.
Yes, definitely. And of course, we're some ironic reason we're sacrificing that pleasure tonight to record the podcast. But thankfully, we live in 2015, and I'm sure a nice bit of catch-up TV tomorrow on the commute will.
BBC
will sort me out.
iPlayer.
Yeah. Yeah, what a fantastic app.
It's a bit dodgy on PS4.
Okay.
Can be a bit funny sometimes, but obviously on the computer it's flawless.
Yeah, no, it runs well on the iPhones and the rest of it. So, yeah, that'll be a really good catch-up for tomorrow's commute.
Right, let's should we trot along to Listener's Corner? We got another response from Oz, who contacted us last week, just asking a few questions, including whether we thought The Wire would make a good video game. He was just sending a little reply back, just appreciating the response. He says, the show gets me through many hours at work and in the car, so I really appreciate the work that goes into it. I'm even considering rewatching the whole series alongside the podcast in order to make it an even more enriching and thorough experience. So yeah, that's good that we're getting people to watch The Wire again. It is it's very strange watching The Wire like this, having just sat down and watched it for pleasure, but then when you watch it again and you realise you're casting a very critical eye on everything, notes at hand, ready to type furiously about some brainwave, it's a very, very different way of watching the show. So I encourage other people to do the same and go along with it, because it certainly get the discussion flowing, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. And despite having watched it for pleasure so many times beforehand, I do feel that you just, with that extra eagle eye for the analysis, you do learn a lot more about the nuances of the story. I certainly have. So yeah, definitely come along with the podcast and watch it as we go along. Definitely recommend.
So yeah, thanks for getting in touch, Oz. We got another email from Damon as well, who's a very loyal listener, and he's given us he's jumped ahead a little bit, making a little comment about what's actually in this episode. I will read it out, but we're not going to discuss it just yet. We'll wait until we actually get to this scene in the recap. He says, regarding the dinner scene with Colvin and the kids, what is your guys' opinion on why their attitude changed when they got done and sat in the car? Do you think this was just shown to reinforce that no matter what environment you put them in, they will revert to their true selves sooner or later? They were very pleasant in the restaurant, though embarrassed, then began acting obnoxious in the car when they left. Why was this portrayed, in your opinion? I get that he and Parenti discussed their attitude change the next day, but it always seemed the slightest bit vague to me why they acted out when they were finished dinner. He also says, a side note about this episode, I love Poot's return.
Mm-hmm. Well, my mouth is zipped for the moment, but we will
Yeah,
get to that.
we'll hold off for the time being. But thank you very much for the email. We'll definitely be discussing those two elements when we get to them, for sure.
Okay.
And it's your turn to be recapping
Yes.
this week.
Alright, so this week we are, unlike last week where we only had a few little strands, we are bouncing around the city a bit more this time. There's a few more characters to visit. Thankfully, each section is a bit more manageable. We're only going to be jumping around sort of 2-3 sections max for each person or institution, so hopefully we should be able to run through things a bit quicker here. Let's kick things off, as the episode does, with Bodhi's crew. Feels like a little while since we've caught up with Bodhi and the crew, little Kevin and the rest of them. So this is what happens in this episode. So, as Damon's just mentioned, Poot returns to the streets after a 15-month stint in jail, having been arrested alongside Avon and many of the lieutenants back in Mission Accomplished. Bodhi tells him about how Marlo was able to threaten the crew into working under him, but Poot does not mind the change of leadership, stating that one boss is the same as the next. Herc and Dozeman pull up in a patrol car looking for little Kevin to question in Lex's murder. Nobody tells Herc their names. Recognising only Bodhi and Poot, he says everyone under 5'6" and 150 pounds goes in the wagon, and the 4 smallest corner boys are therefore snatched up. Not realising that Kevin's nickname is a joke on his portly size, Herc and Dozeman leave the real little Kevin on the street as he, Bodhi and Poot leave the scene amused at Herc and Dozeman's stupidity. So we're kicking things off with a very random punchline of a SpongeBob SquarePants joke.
Yeah, that's right. It's a snail that goes meow.
So, I guess very typical of The Wire and other shows to cut to something as we hear the punchline as some sort of way to hide a scene transition. And of course, a nice way for Bodhi to exclaim his annoyance with too much downtime and a lack of hard work, which is something that sort of defines Bodhi throughout the show.
Yeah, this is an ongoing thing with Bodhi, and I really like later on how he stressed this with Naaman, like, no, I mean, are you ready to work? As in, like, you're not just here to make money and sort of act like some character. You have to put the time in, put the effort in, and that's what he's not seeing here. He's just seeing people chatting about cartoons.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It must be encouraging for him to see Poot again here, and he has a really, really nice return. I really like the fact that they take the piss out of the fact that you sort of get a charge and you get a sentence and you don't even serve like half of it, you know.
Yeah,
It just makes a bit of a mockery of the system.
certainly. It seems like a very, very early release. I mean, he said 15 months served on a 5-year sentence, I think is what he says. And you have to wonder whether that's a better ratio than Avon got. I think it was it 7 years and was it a couple of years he did? I'm not sure, but it can't be quite as good as Avon's. But still, it's rather crazy how early he's out. But it's good for us because I'm not sure if they ever decided that Poot would be coming back. But he's a great character, and I'm glad that they did decide to bring him back after he was apparently sort of written off at the end of season 3 by the looks of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, very, very welcome arrival, and it's done in a great style here.
And of course he has to immediately adjust to everything that's happened whilst he's been gone. What remains of the Barksdales has gone, and now Marlo is king and owns all of the territory, and is obviously a bit disappointed to hear that Bodhi's gone that way. But as we know, there was very little choice to be had.
Yeah, very quickly that work is sort of a prevailing established attitude. There's not too much time to mourn, losses. That conscience that costs in the street, really. So, yeah. And we see that yet again, despite the fact that we love Poot, he's still sort of reduced to this pussy hound. I think he's called here by little Kevin, isn't he? He's always seems to just amount to this sexual beast in most of the conversations about him, which just eventually becomes pretty funny. I mean,
it is quite funny, but we don't really see that much of it, do we?
No.
It's not like Poot is constantly showing up to work, like with a girl around his arm or something. Like I
think on occasions he has got a
show.
Yeah, I think occasionally he's seen with a couple of ladies around his arms. But yeah, it is. I know what you mean. It doesn't really have too much to prove it by any means. It could just be all talk. And he's not actually as one-dimensional as that sort of pussy hound label makes him sound on paper.
No.
Yeah, so he says that he stands for a lot more in the show than just that.
And then we get Herc and Dozeman arriving. Well, just the stupidity continues. Really, with Herc, he just fails to see the clear picture again.
Mm.
And it's interesting that the idea of rip and run still flows through him, even when that's not necessarily what he's doing. He's just kind of rushing up and making it quick and easy for himself. Okay, anyone that's small, come with me. That must narrow it down. Let's just get this done and get it out of the way with. There's just not a lot of thought. There's not a lot of preparation. So it's quite frustrating to watch Herc here when we're used to seeing a lot of the casework being done, being very methodical, and Herc is the exact opposite.
Yeah. And again, the whole thing with Herc about a little knowledge is a dangerous or a useless thing. And, Herc remembers Poot. Fair enough. That's at least some sort of talent he's got for faces there. But totally insufficient job of challenging that release that he mentions himself was, a little bit odd that he's out again. Just an absolute head in hands moment as they fall for that nicknaming trick. But it wouldn't be a Herc scene otherwise, I don't think.
It's just because he's only thinking about one thing.
Yeah.
He's not trying to pick up on any of these extra bits because that's a distraction from the camera.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Anything else about that first scene?
No, not that I can think of. No.
Okay.
Quite a lot to be had in that first scene for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we just go to Bodhi's other scene or other main section in the show. So Bodhi and Poot delineate for Namond the new corners for him to work, having been pressured by Namond's mother Delonda. Bodhi insists that Namond keep his mother from interceding on his behalf. As they work their corner, Sergeant Carver and Officer Colicchio catch Namond's crew unprepared. The corner boys flee, but 8-year-old Kennard isn't fast enough to escape. Carver destroys the stash of vials and lets Kennard go, claiming that it's not worth processing. When Carver catches up with Namond, Donut and little Kennard at Cutty's gym, he chastises them for being so careless and warns them that the next time he catches them dealing drugs, he'll beat them and send them to be processed for juvenile detention.
All right. So Naaman's getting a bit of a shaming here for having his mum turn up for him, or so it seems. I like Poot's comment, him from Weebay.
Yeah. Yeah,
which is, an interesting point.
There's a lot of callbacks to particularly Season 1 actually in this episode. I'm sure we'll come up with a few more of them, but yeah, it's nice to see how many characters sort of comment on this shift of how things have changed. And yeah, it's really cool how Bodhi just totally does a good job of shaming Naaman to the right extent. Like, he tactically sort of keeps Kennard around to hear the motherly truth, but he does send Donut off for some reason, like quite pointedly. Perhaps trying to limit the shame enough to make him want to harden up, but not so much that he's demoralised completely.
Yeah.
And the bust on that corner, I guess Carver's been noting that Naaman has crept into the world of dope peddling and wants to lay down some Carver-style intimidation. He's clearly been keeping his eyes on the street as Colvin has instilled in him.
Good police.
Yeah. And yeah.
It's Carver teaching a new way of communicating many of Colvin's lessons.
Certainly, yeah. He just constantly seems to be.
He's always able to impart what he's learnt from that.
Yeah, and I mean, just the way he handles that scene as well. So clean and logical. Get in, intimidate them, destroy the product. Don't chase after them, but, be ready to track them later for an extra dose of intimidation. And it's kind of become this Carver trademark now, and he's incredibly likeable for it. So, good points to Carver.
And obviously, that one common part of that is how, he knows all of them. He knows where they hang. He knows enough about them that, as you said before, he doesn't need to catch any of them. He just lets them go. Like, if it comes down to, if it comes down to wanting to make some kind of prosecution or whatever, he always gives that final warning, doesn't he? Or fair warning, he says.
Yeah.
It's quite a few instances where Carver presents some kind of fair warning as like, this is the last time that this will happen. And it seems to stick, so clearly he has some sway. Although he does keep having to issue different fair warnings. So
It's true.
the kids do find a way to do something else instead, but but nonetheless, it shows that he's looking out for him and that he's got his eyes well on the street and that he's developing into a really, really good officer. So
Definitely.
and then on the flip side, we have someone like Colicchio, who's just a brute, really, just not too happy about the talking method. And why even do this? Like, why? Why can't we just beat them up? Why can't we harass the children? He's quite a disturbing case, is Colicchio.
Yeah, got that sadistic streak. But yeah, and it makes sense that he'd, go after school to the gym and catch them all in one spot. And of course, Carver obviously was one of the first connections to that gym that Cutty set up at the end of Season 3, so it all follows through quite nicely. And shows how once you've done a lot of the homework, as it were, learning the people on the street, doing lots of reconnaissance, learning the names, you can then, your job becomes a lot easier because you don't have to do any of the chasing. You just have to know what's going on and then go and do your job. So you just go to the gym and you do some intimidation. So, yeah.
And it's nice to have the connection from Carver to Cutty to Weebay.
Yeah.
Because obviously they were together at Jessup.
So again, another Season 1 callback for Weebay there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he refers to that section in Philadelphia where he was actually the main bait.
The one that stopped him.
The main bait in grabbing Weebay, yeah.
So keeping those connections, all those pieces.
Yeah, definitely.
I do like the shot of Cutty walking towards him as well. There's that shot in the mirror where he just looks slightly to his left. and then there's just him
Yeah.
walking away in the mirror instead.
A lot of that chat comes through the mirror, doesn't it? Yeah, that's very, very good.
Yeah.
Um,
Just sort of neat little shots like that. People looking in mirrors and reflections off things. It's a common visual theme in The Wire.
yeah.
Kind of like how, for example, in Breaking Bad, there's always shots underneath things. You're always like underneath water or underneath some kind of, floor of something that's having, say, items poured into it or whatever. It's a very common.
Yeah, and
Common
the
theme
floor
in,
always
Breaking
becomes
Bad visually.
transparent, doesn't it? Even if it's not in real life, just for the sake of the camera.
Yeah.
It's kind of an odd technique, but it does make everything a lot more artistic and interesting, certainly. Yeah, so good. I guess the sort of final part of that scene is where Kennard wanders off after having been talked to by Carver, and that the kids are trying to do a good job of staying tough and not getting rattled by the words. And Kennard's like, "Oh, he don't think I can jail." It's just this kind of complete entrenchment of that. I can do my time even from the age of 6 or whatever. So
Yeah, it's really shocking, isn't it, to hear this like young kid saying things like that. It's just every time you just say, "What did I just hear?"
yeah, it's crazy. All right, so that's Bodhi's stuff. Any more on that, or should we move on to the politics?
No, it's all pretty wrapped up. The Bodhi stuff, we don't see too much. It's just little connections between the kids and between what's going on with Herc, and then the return of Poot. Really.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
What's next?
So we're going to look at the politics now for a bit, and the first one we're going to look at is Carcetti's meeting with the city leaders. So Carcetti attends a meeting with city leaders to inform him of the issues facing Baltimore as he heads towards his administration. On the matter of growing the tax base, Carcetti raises the idea of adding casinos to the waterfront, but it's shot down and he decides on building a promenade by the harbour instead. The city council president, Nerese Campbell, finds it suspicious that Carcetti wants to give a pay rise to the position of commissioner, given Irvin Burrell's recent poor performance, and explains how such a raise will never make it into the budget. Later in private, Campbell tells Carcetti that Royce, the outgoing mayor, had groomed her to be his successor. She seems angry at both Carcetti and Gray for jumping the line to take Royce's position as mayor, as they sat below her on the city council. Carcetti admits to being ignorant of this relationship and hints that she may become governor, being first in the line of succession if he decides to run for governor in 2008.
All right, so Carcetti hitting a bit of a block on Burrell as he learns this bit is him learning the reality of the city's economic situation.
I like to call it the bowl of shit symphony, this scene.
Yeah, there's quite a lot to be taken in here. It's a fecal feast.
Definitely, yeah. This is the first real onslaught of these that we see. And the way the old mayor describes it is it's sort of once a day you'll get a certain group that comes in and lays their crap on the table, but you see that it really does come from all angles, and the opposition comes...
Yeah, this time they're all sat in a room together.
And no one can agree on anything, so... And you can see on Carcetti's face that this is coming as a real shock, the amount of opposition he's facing as the mayor, and the lack of support from pretty much all angles, especially Nerese. So it's really, really tricky at this moment for Carcetti to...
But he does have Norman on side. I mean, Norman is his loyalty and his sort of... just his experience and knowledge just constantly valuable as he delivers that quite scathing burn on Nerese Campbell about about the reality of that the situation becoming clear to him, or the nuances or whatever it is becoming clear to him. It's sort of a nice burn. There's a bit of tension there, and Norman leads the laughter. He kind of almost like encourages everyone to laugh instead of them taking it seriously.
Yes, certainly.
Very much seems like he starts that. He's there to kind of be on Carcetti's side, really, release that tension for him.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So it's all sorts. I guess the first ball of shit we see is actually Rupert Bond. He wants that money following the dry up of federal grants for some reason. And then, of course, Carcetti explains how his ideas conflict with that. And then, of course, Nerese is bringing the second one. And, of course, the school's deficit is alluded to as well here, suggesting that next big bowl of shit that's going to be eaten up, which is next episode, I think, when they discover the full fiscal value of it.
He clearly has a certain alliance with Burrell because of his favour within her constituency.
Yeah. So it's all sorts of
And then they talk
conflicts.
about the rainy day fund, don't they? There's some kind of 12 million rainy day fund.
Mm. Yeah, so it's it's just these nuances certainly becoming visible to Carcetti here, and there really is this quite epic sourness between Carcetti and Nerys, and you almost sense that he sort of just finishes this meeting. You know, this is the first of many. Let's just abruptly finish this meeting so I can pick this bone with Nerys before I get torn down and worn down anymore by her. And yeah, he just very quickly goes over to her and like tries to set it straight. And I don't think he was expecting so much opposition from her. She really doesn't sound apologetic in the least. She just really goes at his neck, and Carcetti is forced to try and take some sort of moral high ground again, and decides to use that the ambition, the whole gubernatorial potential, as his way of getting on top of her, and still saying that she can get what she wants. So it is a real dog-eat-dog world here.
Yeah, Carcetti is smart with Campbell. He sort of knows how to try and stay friends, as it were. But I do feel like it's a bit of a lost cause, given the fact that the whole guaranteed mayoral slot is exactly what she was promised last time, and she didn't get it. So I don't see why she would be all that motivated to trust Carcetti on this.
Yeah. No, definitely, yeah. So, tricky stuff.
Yeah.
Should we go on to the next bit?
Yeah, I think it's ready to move on.
Okay, so Carcetti, Norman and Watkins agree that firing Burrell is off the table because of the potential backlash of his black voters at the idea of a white mayor firing a black police commissioner. Carcetti tries to coax Burrell into stepping down, but Burrell understands the racial situation the mayor-elect is in attempting to get rid of Burrell, and refuses to leave quietly, claiming that he will only do so if he is fired. Instead, Carcetti tells William Rules that Burrell is to undertake no initiative as commissioner without clearing it through him first. He then requests 2 promotions, voucher to Deputy Commissioner of Administration for helping him throughout the campaign, and Major Daniels will become CID Colonel, filling the late Ray Forster's position. Carcetti claims that he wants to give Daniels carte blanche to reform the investigative units.
Okay, so Rules continuing to be very smiley and trying to maintain alliances with everyone, be at peace, as it were, which is unusual for a man who's actually normally quite antagonistic outside of the politics. And he knows how to play the game well, as we've already seen, but he's also reminded that there is a bit of a ceiling to his progress later on when, he asks about why not just fire Burrell, and as Wilson says, we mind you asking,
Yeah.
You don't come this far up. There is still a limitation on you.
Yeah, it's weird, because when Norman first floated the idea, or, planted it in Tommy's head that they could force him to leave, he suggested that, they need to dig up some dirt on him. Which then doesn't play at all into their next conversation at the classic diner that they used to eat lunch at in season 3, in slightly less stressful days. But that doesn't play into it at all, and it just seems to be a sort of empty request that Burrell would, very predictably back down from. So yeah, it's certainly weird to see how that goes on. And just more sadness really. I mean, Carcetti hasn't been a bad mayor. He's had 5 minutes so far, but already the people around him are forcing him into these pretty suspect relationships. Even Norman, who is kind of suggesting that you can manipulate the system here by getting Burrell to walk himself if you find the right leverage. Which it's part and parcel of politics, but is that really, on the face of it, a particularly moral decision?
And eventually it ceases to be about doing the right thing, whatever that may have been at one point. If it was about trying to destroy this stats game and, remove the administration that was encouraging it, and, somehow rehabilitate the situation of the crime and rehabilitate the police department by getting rid of Burrell, doesn't seem to be about that anymore. There seems to be become quite personal, and let's dig up some dirt and, the original meaning of it has been lost somewhat, and in a way, even Carcetti doesn't seem to realise it. Like it is quite a slip in what is his first few days of his term.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, and it's interesting to see that the way Rules reacts to his next chat with Carcetti as well, and he's again not too poker-faced about his opinions of police here, and shows that he's a little more bent to the corrupt policing ways than he advertised last episode, I think. His distaste at the mention of Daniels' promotion and his sort of celebration of the Valchek promotion should have made it clear to Carcetti at this point that Rules wasn't quite to be believed, I guess.
Yeah, he as I was saying before, he knows how to play the game well, but he also asks that slightly random question and is shown his limitations.
Yeah, definitely. All right, final politics. Or have you got anything else to add?
No, I think I'm ready to move on, yeah.
Okay, all right, this is a really nice scene here. So Daniels tells Pullman that there's a chance Baltimore might be able to turn itself around under the new administration. She, Carver Greggs, and Sidner are present at the promotion ceremony. At the promotions, Burrell, uninformed of who has been promoted, claims to Rules, "Valchek we could have guessed. He's Carcetti's man, but Daniels," as Rules walks away. Seeing the backdoor promotion, Burrell now realises that with Daniels, Carcetti has an African-American replacement for him as police commissioner.
So we're beginning with possibly the most optimistic scene in the whole show.
Yeah, it really sticks out, doesn't it? Yeah.
Daniels and Perlman, like their success has waned any of their cynicism that we might have seen earlier in the show, and it's actually reached the point where they now appear very naive, especially when they're in this really idyllic home life and they're obviously doing well in their jobs. And Daniels even goes to the extent of toasting Carcetti, like, really earnestly as well. Maybe things aren't going to be so fucked up. Like,
Yeah.
Sorry, like you haven't seen the script. Like, that's not what this show does. This show is quite intent on displaying the fact that these problems are, it's cyclical. There is no sudden stop to all the issues. There is no utopia that's about to come about.
Yeah, I mean, as show watchers,
the key message.
Yeah, as show watchers, we've been seeing Baltimore for 4 years cumulatively in fiction, and obviously Daniels certainly had a longer career than that so far, and I'm sure he should have got the message by now that things have, I'm sure, not got any more improved since he started on the Eastern Patrol beat. So yeah, it is odd. I quite like that you picked up on the sort of naive element to that scene. And it is odd just...
You almost pity them, to such an extent. It's just crazy when he's like toasting Carcetti.
I don't know.
What is this?
Part of you really does want to buy into it and sort of feel that optimism, which is just so barren and void from the show normally. Just so many elements just not very wire at all. You get this really nice downtown apartment, that really sort of relaxing dinner, civilized dinner. Just sort of a genuine love and optimism of a couple, yet to be destroyed, and just generally quite an out of sync turning point and quite a reflective moment for the show. And I remember this being sort of a very memorable landmark moment for me when I was first watching it. I remember sort of really liking the scene, and then I think on later watches, as you were saying, I think that the more you understand about Carcetti from season 5 particularly, you do realise that it is a complete sort of lapse of knowledge, really, lapse of foresight.
Strangely enough, despite all that, I wouldn't describe The Wire as depressing, because it's quite consistently heartwarming. So despite it being very, maybe a tad cynical, but also portraying this harsh reality, yes, it manages to not be depressing, I would say.
Yeah, I think that the world it depicts is fairly depressing on many levels, but it's because the characters are so warmly written, and you can see the humanity in so many of them. I think that really that's the balance that's needed there to make it quite a light and a dark show at the same time, really. So I guess that's really what keeps the balance going. And
there's a lot of humour in it.
yes, that's true. Yeah, it can get very, very funny.
I think it's not really mentioned that much about The Wire, it seems, but it is a very consistently funny show as well.
Definitely, and I think a lot of the humour
sometimes unintentionally, perhaps.
Yeah, a lot of the humour doesn't really feel. There's only a few standout jokes. Ones where you know that you're kind of meant to laugh at this point, and a lot of it comes down to just you understanding the nuances of that character after having seen it a couple of times, really. So that sort of humour can be the funniest sort of humour, but obviously it's like a lot of things with The Wire, you have to have put a bit into it before you can get out of it, sort of thing.
Well, they did do it in a slightly more knowing way at the beginning, where we had those horrible try-hard catchphrases, where it was like a wah wah,
I'm not sure if I can describe that as comedy.
It's like, oh no, it's like, nah, please no.
Yeah. Wow, that was a whole year ago. We're discussing the cringe of that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're horrible.
In fact,
just having watched it again now, it makes you think back to it, and you're like, no, it's just horrible.
Yeah, certainly. In fact, the very episode that happened is referred back to in this scene, because Daniels mentioned how Marla told him that you cannot lose if you do not play. So yet again, another season 1 callback, of which there seem to be plenty in this episode.
So yeah, well, we have our very optimistic scene with Daniels and Perlman, coming back to that. Then we have another very happy scene, I suppose, with the promotion itself. We also, I should add that there is just their relationship. The relationship between Cedric and Rhonda is just constantly being strengthened through these episodes, and how they are succeeding. Like, it's just they're just getting closer and closer each episode. So it's nice that that's not been allowed to just drift.
No,
it's not just that it's an established relationship now. Like, we can kind of see that even then it continues to grow, which is nice.
And the show's healthiest, and thankfully it remains so until the end of the show, which you may not expect from what the show leads you and sets you up for. But in terms of that promotions event, there's obviously the moment where Burrell and Rules discuss the tactical elements behind them, and the fact that Valchek is known to be Carcetti's man, and therefore, I'm sure they know that he was the snitch during the election campaign, that got Burrell into the pit, involving the witness and all the rest of it. They'd be stupid to act on this information, I guess, without concrete evidence, but it does give you an idea of the perspective that these policemen have, and the fact that they still have at least a closeted respect for the guy, because they understand his power and his position in the police department. So yeah, it's certainly interesting to see that perspective on it. Yeah, definitely. And of course, a little feel-good moment for the fans, the loyal fans, where Daniels gets to shake hands with a lot of the old crew. Bit of Carver, bit of Kima. Does Prez show up? Prez's wife is there for Valchek. I think it's someone else. Is it Sidner? I think it's Sidner, actually. So just keep us old MCU nostalgia people happy. Always good. So
obviously Carver giving a little bit of encouragement, like what was it? He says something like you were quick to major, but this was right on time.
Ages to major, but quick to colonel. Yeah. Okay. Any more for that, or shall we go and see how Bubbles is doing?
Let's move on.
Alright, so we've got 3 sections for Bubbles. There's a fair bit this episode. So Bubbles tracks down Kima and tells her about the other junkie who's been assaulting and robbing him constantly. She tells him that as a homicide detective there's little she can do for him, but offers to put him in touch with Herc. Herc meets Bubbles and tells him he's looking for little Kevin. Bubbles reuses his hat trick from Season 1, visiting Bodhi's crew pretending to sell hats, and placing a red hat on Kevin as Herc watches from a distance. As Herc and Dozeman see the red hat go on to the real little Kevin, the fattest member of the crew, they both display a shock of stupidity, having not realised that Kevin's nickname was flipped on them. In return, Herc promises Bubbles to come within 5 minutes the next time his aggressor shows up again.
Okay, so Bubbles wanting to work. It's nice that he mirrors. Perhaps mirrors isn't the right word, but he kind of he repeats what Bodhi says earlier about being ready to work. It's like a sort of little mini theme in this episode, I think.
Yeah.
About the sort of the employers and the employee. And yeah, Bubbles here is ready work, wants to get back to his informing. I do like his about the fact that Kima can't do anything because she's homicide now, and he says, if he happens to kill me, you'll be able to help me out.
Yeah, he's a really, really sharp-tongued guy. It doesn't seem like the years of heroin has really sort of melted his brain too much in that respect. I love the way he also says, that this guy looks on me like an ATM, which I think is quite a nice image as well. I think
so she ends up kind of trying to meet a compromise, which is just just hearing Greg suggest Herc is the worst, because he obviously ends up being such a horrible failure to Bubbles.
Yeah, I mean, Kima's moving on. Unfortunately, things are changing. She's got more important stuff to see to, and I guess Bubbles' info won't play into her murder angles no more. And I guess we are lucky that Bubbles has... Herc has a bubble-shaped quandary, I guess is the way of looking at it. Like, he needs to identify a street thug, and that is literally Bubbles' greatest talent. So he's certainly come along at the right time here.
But he's not able to return the favour on Bubbles' street thug.
No, not at all, which is a real shame. Shall we move on to that? That's the next section, actually.
Well, I was going to also mention that it's nice that we get the callback to the hat game, which does end up getting used.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And they finally realise their stupidity. As little Kevin earlier said, if they even knew how to just flip it, he'd have handcuffs on by that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true.
They realise the problem now. So, but it's nice to get a callback to that. I don't think we've seen the hat game.
No, I don't think it's been since season one. Since early season one.
Season one, is it?
Yeah, because I mean, as soon as they got the pages and wiretaps up, there was no more hack game. That was like the really basic early reconnaissance stuff. So it really has been like 30, 40 episodes since we've seen them. So yeah, again, another nice...
Again, another season one callback then.
Yeah, there really are plenty of this episode for some reason. I did wonder if it was sort of necessary to take the time and the sort of small risk associated with that, if all Herc and Doe's want is just eyes on little Kevin. Bubs could have just pointed him out, particularly as they're not snapping pictures here, which is
it is a bit odd that he's pointed out in this way.
Yeah, because the reason they originally went through the pain of the whole hats routine was because they needed some photographic evidence, and obviously with a red hat on, perfect time to snap a shot, and then you can put it on your chalkboard and you work away at the investigation. Not to say that that's what Herc and Dozeman should be doing here, or no, to say that they should be doing that certainly is the case. If they actually want to build a case that will stand up in court, they need to collect all this physical evidential stuff, and not just these regurgitated eyewitness accounts that they seem to rely on the whole time, or they assume that they'll be able to rely on.
Well, that's why it seems odd that they are getting, they're getting him to approach him in this way with the hats and everything, when they just end up sat there talking about it. It just seems a bit odd. It's like
it's just a way of
supposedly they needed the evidence, and now in their stupidity they're just not even thinking about that now.
Yeah, again, it's like
they're thinking about their other stupidity.
Exactly. Yeah, they've thought about a half or a quarter of a problem, and they haven't really thought it through. Like, I should be taking a picture right now.
It's just compounding upon them, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess I guess the only logical way of looking at it is that they wanted a nice callback to season one. And they certainly got that. I appreciated it for all the memories it brought back. It seems to be a lot of Weebay-based callbacks this episode, because obviously Weebay was the first guy that they put a red hat on in season one. So, yeah. And then, of course, Herc finishes off with his mention of a 5-minute warning as a return gift. And there's a horrible inevitability of a classic Herc fuck up in that comment.
I mean, judging by everything that we've seen so far, there's no way that we can think that suddenly he's going to be able to come in and save the day, because everything that he's been doing so far, he's failed at.
Yeah.
There's been some kind of fuck up in everything, so it's just can't help but hang your head and just hope that it doesn't go too badly. But obviously, we know that that metal pipe comes out.
Yep.
And there's no escape. Should we move on to the next bit?
Yeah,
then?
sure. I do apologise. I said there were 3 sections. There's only 2, so this is the last Bubbles. Okay, so that night, Bubbles catches sight of the assailant in an alley. He quickly phones the Major Crimes Unit from a payphone and leaves a message with Dozeman for Herc to come immediately. Herc is busy interrogating little Kevin, whom he has brought in for questioning over Lex's murder. Herc gets Bubs' message and tells Dozeman to call Bubbles back and tell him to wait until tomorrow, forgetting that Bubs has no cell phone. Bubs sees a police car come down the street and makes his move, announcing his presence to his tormentor. But Herc is not in the car, and the driver does not see the 2 dope fiends' altercation. Bubs is once again badly beaten by his antagonist. Meanwhile, Herc's interrogation of little Kevin is fruitless. In an attempt to get Kevin to admit to witnessing the murder, Herc tells him that he's already talked to an informant who places him at the crime scene. When Kevin inquires if Randy is the person that he's talked to, Herc tips his hand by not making any inquiries about the name. Detective Sidner leaves in disgust at Herc's attempt to interrogate little Kevin. Sidner tells Dozeman that they aren't going to get anywhere as they have no charges against him to use as leverage, which Sidner believes from past experience is key to making an interrogation work.
So we have this less than compelling Fiend story. I believe he's referred to as the Fiend in sort of notes and things about the show. He never has a name in the show, but
Doesn't deserve one.
So yeah, it's sort of that continues on. But the interesting part here, and maybe I'm missing something here, but the phone rings and Herc goes to pick it up and he doesn't want to do it because he's dealing with his interrogation. Why doesn't Dozeman go and help Bubbles?
I guess
Why can he? Because he doesn't seem to be doing anything.
It's just
So
it's just complete laziness.
I guess he's
isn't
just useless. Like, he does come across as a bit useless in this season. It has to be said. Like Dozeman, he kind of pops up here and there as this, ancillary cop, but it's just like he seems so useless in this season. He's just there to accompany Herc and say lines every now and again, but he just doesn't seem to manage to accomplish anything. He seems to have had the police instinct shot out of him.
It is weird. Like, the rules doesn't even suggest that he goes after him, and it's just very, very bizarre. I guess Dozeman may not have been privy to what it was that the arrangement that him and Bubbles had, so maybe he thought that only Herc could really be of assistance here. In typical Herc stuff.
Now that's initiative.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's very true. But don't forget,
Some
Herc
guy
was
is
busy.
calling for
Herc was,
help.
like,
He's
really
literally calling for help stopping this guy. Can you? Because Bubbles is not going to pick up the phone and go, "Hello, good afternoon. Could I speak with Herc, please?" He's going to be like, "Oh, he's beating on me, man. He's beating on me." But I like to. I don't know. I think it's silly. I think Dozeman should go and help him. But there we are. It doesn't happen. The guy's a bit useless. And then the only thing more useless than that is Herc's interrogating, which is just embarrassing. Yeah. He's so terrible. And Sidner actually seems to snap a little bit. He finally has had enough.
Oh, yeah.
It's good to see because I feel like Sidner is just so much better than this. I mean, he's not like the best detective or anything like that, but he's so much better than Herc. He is actually a useful investigator.
As we've said, he's got a lot of knowledge under the hood, but he doesn't really have that leadership instinct, so he can't really. You feel like he can't really voice it. He kind of needs to be guided. He's not much of a leader. Yeah. But when applied well, he's like a valuable member. Definitely, doesn't at one point Daniels describe Sidner? This is in season 1. He describes him as like one of his best, doesn't he? Or is it Cantrell? He said, Cantrell is like, Sidner's my best. You can't take my best man.
That's it.
But I've taken your worst, haven't I? Obviously, Perez. So, So,
Yeah, wow. Season 1.
Certainly, yeah.
It's all coming out.
And, it's just ridiculous. I mean, Herc lays a bit too thickly on the whole point about we have a witness who puts you there. A lot of street thugs would assume that it's an intimidation tactic to try and force some sort of confession. But he just says it a few too many times to the point where it does pique little Kevin's interest, and of course he then raises the name Randy, and Herc very stupidly just sort of vacantly stares. And of course, in Herc's very short-sighted interest. If little Kevin knows that Randy is involved in this, then it's clear to little Kevin that they do know at least something about this, and therefore little Kevin is actually in some element of danger here. So, what obviously doesn't go through Herc's head is the implications on the street for this sudden leak of a snitch. Classic, just 10 steps behind Herc. So this is again a real turning point that I'm sure we've referred to it every episode so far, but this is the actual moment it happens where Randy's life suddenly turns upside down.
Yeah. Yeah, this is that leak, and but Herc is not really switched on enough to really see what's going on, and little Kevin is just messing with him at this point with his what are they, like peanut M&Ms or something?
Yeah, don't like the orange ones. Nope. Yeah, so very scared, very
pretty shambolic shit all round.
The MCU just gets more and more frustrating as we go along. It's just unbelievable where it's gone to. Quickly going back to that stuff with Bubs, you were saying...
Yeah, I was going to say, because, we've got to get back to the bit where it all fails with Bubs.
Yeah, I mean, this section, I think, is probably one of the best bits of this season when it comes to the whole Bubs storyline. I mean, I have mentioned how I think it's fairly unengaging for a lot of it, but the stuff around this couple of episodes where Herc is sort of on the trail, and there's an element of stakes suddenly here when we know that Herc's got to deliver here, otherwise Bubs really is in a bad way. And I think there's another occasion next episode where he fucks up even more badly. So yeah, this stuff with Bubs is actually fairly engrossing, and I do think that, as you were saying with Dozeman, who doesn't exactly take initiative and go after Herc, he does at least try and bring him back, or then he realizes, of course, that he hasn't got a cell phone. But you'd have thought that, if he's camping out by that payphone, just ring, last number radar, ring that payphone back, and let Bubs know the situation. That, Bubs will probably just implore Dozeman to come after him instead, and perhaps he'll take the hint at that point. So, again, a very missed opportunity based on some more dumbassery, really. So.
Yeah, Dozeman is just a bit of a spare part.
And I guess finally, as far as my comments go, it's I like how...
Speaking of spare parts, we have spare parts with the kids, don't we?
Yes.
With their models.
Oh, that's true, yeah. Get hidden away. It's very hard to see where they would have fit, because despite the fact that he looks like he's cheating, the Eiffel Tower looks very complete.
It's a bit wobbly, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it wouldn't stand up for too long.
No, I'm sure it's pretty good. But yeah, away from the model.
Yeah.
Later for the model.
Obviously there's that kind of hellish imagery to that back alley with just the guy beating up some randomers, as he seems to always do. It's almost similar to the stuff with Dookie at the end of the show, where he sort of goes down that alleyway with the pony men, I guess you call them. They're called street Arabas or something like that, aren't they? I forgot what they're called exactly. It's like the word for the street salesman. But it's this kind of hellish imagery, and I like the way that they put that alongside the real class of the steakhouse. Those two scenes were intercut just to sort of, I guess, establish those thin lines between heaven and here very clearly for us again. Certainly did a good job of that.
All right, yeah, I think that's about it for Bubbles then in this episode.
Yep. All right, so normally, obviously, school has got two very sort of solid strands now. We've got the Prez class stuff and the school pilot program, so we're going to go for separate strands here on those fronts. Got a couple of sections for Prez's class. So firstly, Prez sets his math class to work in groups. Watching Dookie use the class computer, Randy discovers that he can buy candy online in bulk and increase his profits, but he needs a credit card. They ask for Prez to order the candy with his card, stating that the business helps improve his arithmetic. Prez agrees on the condition that he receive the cash up front, but warns Randy and Dookie against selling drugs to get the money more quickly. As he and Dookie pass men playing craps in the alleyway after school, Randy decides to wager money, putting the probability skills he learned in class to work. He wins big and has enough cash to present to Prez the next day. Prez is not happy that Randy gambled, but orders the bulk candy anyway as promised.
All right, so we start off with these maths groups in the class. Prez's plan for these groups is somewhat reminiscent of our first scene with him and the kids, where he has that seating plan that completely and utterly fails, but this time he's able to guide them into groups and they listen.
That's true.
He knows who they are now. He's not sort of like just pointing at names on a board. He can actually point at them and knows exactly who they are, and it's nice to see that development for him as a teacher and his experience with the kids.
Certainly, and the change seating plan, I guess, is some sort of suggestion of classroom reform coming up.
Yeah. Reform, Lamar.
Oh, yeah. And
there's a nice moment with Prez and Michael as well, where he's still trying to sort of connect where he can, and talks about he must have some kind of reach, which produces quite a big smile in Michael, which we don't often see.
Yeah, their odd sort of tape measuring activity,
where it's like the width of your arm span and your height, and they're the same.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I get, I'm sure that's not in the exam, but it's certainly life skills that would be useful to learn. And I think it's cool that Prez sort of goes down this route of far more engaging classes at the expense of the curriculum. He certainly sort of really feels a need to really matter at the school.
And of course he is trying to encourage a different style of teaching. He doesn't want to just do everything to the curriculum. He wants to do what's actually good for the kids. He wants to be a teacher that gets to know them really well and has this attachment to them, and whether or not those closer to the system consider that misguided. We're seeing what happens when you do try that in this classroom with Prez.
Certainly, yeah. And of course we see Randy learn his own lesson, which he deduces himself when he sees that the Koreans have been marking up his candy from the cost price, as he sees how cheap things are online, which is a pretty sweet deduction. I've got to say, he's clearly a very business-minded man.
Yeah, this enterprising continues.
Yeah, and he's driven enough here to pursue Prez's card with much confidence. He knows he'll be able to win Prez over.
And so they, they go outside, and he's obviously talking about needing the cash up front.
Yes.
And he encourages this good behaviour in Randy and Dookie, and these kind of, I suppose to some extent they are kind of like the stoop kids. And then we have Miss Deason? She finds out what the other kids, perhaps the corner kids, are doing when she gets there, because she finds out that her car's been stolen.
Yeah.
Which leads in very nicely into the next scene, which I think is with
Donut.
Is it with? But yeah, obviously it's Donut that gets out of the car. Is it the bit with?
I think it's like the Bodie corner stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Bodie and Naymond, where he's sort of he's showing where the corners are now. But the shot starts with a picture of that the bumper sticker on about the parking for Edward Tillman Middle. So sort of nice subtlety in that connection. And license plates and things like that are often being used to show parts of the story and show connections between scenes, which is always a nice little trick. But it's not really pointed out the fact that it's Donut taking this car, so it's a pretty subtle connection. I wouldn't be surprised if people missed that the first time.
Yeah. No, definitely.
And it's just continuing that one little bit of character that Donut does have, which is, he steals cars.
Yeah. Yeah. Unlike Poot's Pussyhound, that is a genuine bit of one-dimensional character work, but he is entertaining nonetheless.
And it's kind of nice that when she says, I think my car's been stolen, Dookie and Randy, they don't seem shocked at all. They're just like, oh, that's typical. So
Prez is sort of like, I know exactly what happened here, but can I really tell you? Or
yeah. You also can't really prove it. So
yes, true.
Bit of a pointless accusation.
Yeah. And then, of course, we get Randy and Michael running past their craps game in the evening. Their perfect source of semi-legitimate income.
It is a little bit of a convenience, isn't it?
Yeah.
They literally just happen upon this game.
I guess and
I think it's after we see the van leaving. Is it after we see Omar and Ronaldo's?
Oh, okay, yeah. So
van
it's
driving
yet
past?
another sort of transition double scene. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
So they're sort of chatting about that, and they end up happening upon this craps game, which they, Randy at least wins big on.
Yeah. No, definitely, yeah. He puts everything he learned into practice, and obviously Prez made it clear that he'd need, legitimate money here. And he certainly accepts the story about the street gambling. Not that it's the most worthy source of income, especially, but, if you consider that they're kids, they earned it by proving that they learnt Prez's lesson well, and that Prez was therefore a good teacher. And they're being resourceful, and it's probably 10 times better than drug money, so, why not Prez? I guess, he might as well sort of satisfy these kids for the moment here, and they do a good job, certainly.
I must say that I feel here Prez does regret his involvement somewhat. And, obviously letting them use the card, but saying that I need the cash first and whatnot.
Yeah.
Maybe now he can begin to understand that, encouraging these things does still lead to potential problems. He doesn't want them to be involved in the game, but they end up playing some other game instead.
Yeah.
It's a point at which maybe he realizes that he shouldn't be getting too close, because even if he thinks what he's doing is encouraging good behavior and
encouraging their
trying
math
to support
skills
them in some way when they don't, encouraging math skills and trying to support them in a way where they don't necessarily have families that do the same thing. It actually can cause problems and still put them in dangerous scenarios.
Yeah.
There's like this element of interference.
And there's possibly quite a scary link here between this scene and when Dookie gets the idea to go to see Prez for money in the very last episode of the show. When he's sort of at the absolute rock bottom and needs some.
Oh, that's the worst. There.
Yeah, it's just you've given them a taste here, and you're going to make the same mistake again to much more dire consequences later on. So.
Oh, thanks, Toby. You just reminded me how bloody, I was saying earlier that The Wire isn't depressing as a show, and it isn't, but the ending of season 4 is just, the last few episodes of season 4 is so tragic.
Yeah.
This
is the end of season 5, that scene. But,
obviously that ends up going much further along, but I mean, the kind of the track of where the kids are ending up by the end of season 4 is just, it's just so tragic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's going to get pretty painful. We haven't got long to go, have we? It's about, 4 episodes? So, yeah, prepare, guys. And,
what else did we have there? Did we have any other bits we haven't mentioned yet? I suppose
there's
the
last
bit was in presenting the money.
There's the bit where the guy's sort of he walks him out the game, and I did wonder on the first time I watched it whether there would be a sort of a Snot Boogie callback, of course, because Snot Boogie was the guy who stole from the craps games after everyone had won their share. So there wasn't a Snot Boogie moment there just to complement all the season 1 callbacks. But I guess there kind of was in spirit, because that's the first time we've really seen a craps game since McNulty discussed it with that street witness. No grabbing the money and running away.
No, but maybe the writers knew we might be thinking of it.
Yeah. And I like the way that Randy, as much as we were saying that Prez is a bit of a softie here, Randy does do the best job possible of not giving Prez a chance to back out. He sort of just lays his case down, wanders out the room pretty casually with a smile on his face, and Prez hasn't really had his chance to resist here. And it's just all these sort of business tactics, tricks of the trade that Randy's clearly picked up.
There is also that other little joke where the guy's walking them away from the dice game, and he's like, "Where do you learn your game?" And Randy says, "Edward Tillman Middle."
Yeah.
Where do you learn that at school?
Yeah, you'd normally say it at school, wouldn't you? But there's a real pride behind just saying Edward Tillman Middle. I did like the scene where Prez, later on he does buy the candy for him, and Randy's there. He's not obviously looking at the keyboard, as he promised to not look at his pin or whatever.
He does have a pretty creepy smile on
Yeah,
his face. Actually,
I wouldn't call it creepy. I'd say if anyone else, any other character in the show, copied that smile, it would be very creepy. But there's something about the Randy smile that it just...
I suppose it's cheeky, isn't it? It's more cheeky than anything else.
There's just something about his Randy smile that's just really always quite sort of uplifting. So, almost matches the Dookie computer boot up grin. I'd put those two facial expressions side by side.
That's what we should do maybe when we finish. when we finish the podcast, we should upload a final video, which is the top. I don't know. I reckon we could go as far as 10, like the top 10 facial expressions in the show, because there's plenty to pick from.
Mostly Prez.
There's a lot of Prez.
I'm sure there's a few Daniels in there as well.
And Daniels, you got to get those wide eyes.
Certainly. Yeah, that would be a good project, actually.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, we spent a little while on that one. Should we quickly do the other half of Prez's class this episode?
Yeah.
This one looks a little bit more macro at the teaching system in general. So, at a faculty meeting, Assistant Principal Marsha Donnelly announces that all teachers, even those in math, will help their students prepare for the reading comprehension portion of the standardised tests coming in the spring. The new material is meant to teach the students how to answer the test questions correctly, but is repetitive and leaves the students unable to grasp any of the language concepts they're supposed to be learning. The sole purpose is to improve the school's test scores. Prez draws a comparison with duking the stats in the police department. His class is bored by the new material, and their practice test answers show that none of them understand it.
All right, so yeah, there's that sort of big sort of faculty meeting where it's pretty on the nose about, yes, this is how terrible the system is. We have Grace's wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is a very resigned view that in Baltimore there's just no escaping those fundamental problems. It's also, I suppose, it has a rather zen quality to it.
Yeah.
I also liked that the 10-point bump that they ask for here, they want some kind of 10-point bump in the results, is the same as the 10, it's like the 10-point bump that they wanted in crime stats for Carcetti, or it was a 10-point drop.
Yeah. So it's
kind of both these institutions
true,
go
yeah.
for those 10-pointers up and down.
Yep, those parallels are everywhere. Prez wasn't saying it just for no reason. Definitely. And I love the way that, again, Mr. Claude Withers, the principal, has very few lines, but whenever he steps in, you know it means a lot. And the way he steps in to explain that, curriculum alignment is the preferred term, it's just, the way he sort of says that is just ridiculous, as if it's the most important element of it. And I love the way all the teachers just sort of dismiss it with sort of complete laughter as this, complete fabrication of what it means and over-grandiosing everything. So it's this disillusionment around everyone, really.
Yep.
And those in charge, like Marcia and Claudel, have to pretend to not be disillusioned, but I'm sure they're just as dissatisfied as the rest.
Well, I think as we mentioned before, Donnelly has got to the point where she's now quite defensive of the system. So she's like this protector of the institution itself.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And
then we end up seeing that Prez clearly doesn't believe in any of it either, but does try to make a lesson of it, at least.
Yeah, it's a moment of clarity for Prez, certainly. Another reflective moment for the show. It's almost the yin to the yang of the Daniels and Perlman discussion. It's the show sort of stepping outside itself and looking back into itself, but with the ultimate cynicism rather than that optimism we saw earlier. And yeah, it's really perhaps more obviously than in most cases voicing what the show's all about.
And do you have any more about the little lesson that we have with them? Because obviously there's all these weird things that they have to answer questions in very specific ways in relation to the story of Pythias or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hilarious when they start reading and you realise how, their sort of study and culture that's just, kind of relevant to the subject of literature, but just not logical to introduce to these kids at this stage, and it just seems so counterproductive, but, it's all part of this exam drive. So again, it's just underlining more and more the sort of absurdities of everything.
Yeah, I suppose it's not really clear what it is that they're supposed to be learning.
Yeah.
What is it that is actually being taught here?
Yeah, it's clear. It's pretty, pretty dense, tricky text, even for the experts in some ways. So, really, quite a task for Prez here. And then there was that interesting bit where Dookie said everybody's safe in the M, right? And clearly trying to inject some sort of horrible foreshadowing again, just to remind us of the end of season 4.
Yeah, it's got to bring in a little bit of that innocence.
Yeah, it's really weird the way he sort of says that out of the blue. You sort of feel like there should be some ominous injection of music after that line.
Dun.
Yeah, it felt a little bit hyper-real, but there we go. That's Dookie's interpretation. At least he has a stab at it. He certainly has a stab at it, unlike the rest.
And Prez's response to this is that he's not going to have any of it, and he's, it's just like, to hell with the evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he just sees the test results and he's just so disappointed, but you couldn't really expect much more. Okay.
Right. So on to our other part of the school.
Yep, so look at the pilot program next. We do have 3 bits for this. So elsewhere at Tillman Middle School, the special class presents a teamwork challenge to the corner kids. They're divided into groups and made to assemble model buildings from kits with no instructions included. Colvin promises a dinner downtown to the group that builds its model the fastest. Naaman, Zenobia and Darnell build a seemingly sturdy Eiffel Tower, with Naaman pocketing the pieces that didn't appear to fit anywhere. Colvin's suspicious but declares them the winners.
So we had groups in one class and we got groups in this class as well, but this time instead of being dictated, their kids are allowed to decide, so we kind of see how the 2 classes are being done very differently. Yeah, they end up having to put these models together with no instructions as a team building exercise, trying to get them to do it all together. And clearly it's not going all that well for most of the tables except for Naaman, Zenobia and Darnell, who seem to be getting on very well.
Yeah, they nail some sort of team work ethic, don't they? Naaman's very much adept at spotting those parallels between institutions again. As the instructions are removed from the box, like they are on the street for the kids, as he says. And he claims, I think later on he claims that his feigned music tastes in the car on the way to the restaurant are designed to make Colvin reevaluate ghetto stereotypes. So he's sort of doing all sorts to challenge his position in society, which is interesting. He's finally sort of been challenged in the right way where he can really sort of demonstrate his intelligence.
I mean, I'm sure Colvin can, he knows that he's messing about here with these extra pieces and whatnot, but I guess just respects his resourcefulness.
Yeah, I think they certainly let him slide on that, and I guess Bunny does stretch the rules as he sees I think it's because he sees the most potential in Naaman, Zenobia and Darnell as a bunch, and they are, I think, the most interesting kids you could have taken to the restaurant, really. Not to say I wouldn't have liked to have seen Albert cursing at waiters and smashing plates, but you can't have everything, so... yeah, I think he is clearly very drawn to Naaman, so I think he was willing to let those rules slide just in the slightest, just to have a slice of Naaman, as it were, at the restaurant. So it sounds very dark, but you get my meaning.
A slice of Naaman at the restaurant. Some kind of wire horror.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's not really about building the model itself. It's more about do they work as a team and what's their emotional response to this difficulty. So they see the potential there and they end up the winners.
Definitely, and everyone seems very excited by this restaurant prize. And it's interesting considering the effect that it really has on these kids. There's just this real gap between expectations and realities here, and I like how the foreign landmarks they have to build as well are nice metaphors for the sort of the way they're now doing things that are outside what they know, and that they're now being challenged to think outside their upbringings.
Yeah, there's more than Baltimore.
Yeah, definitely, which is a sentiment that's brought up, I think, how do you get from here to the rest of the world? That comes up in season 5. Discussion between Dookie and Cutty. So that certainly comes up a few times.
All right, should we move on to the next bit then?
Yep. Okay. So here's the big one, the scene that so many enjoy. So true to his word, Colvin takes the 3 students to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, a high-class establishment by the waterfront. The evening starts well, with Naaman appreciating Colvin's Billie Holiday music, and the students looking forward to a new experience. But once inside, Darnell and Naaman find the atmosphere overwhelming and fail to grasp the restaurant protocol. After they finish dinner and leave the steakhouse disappointed, all three refusing Colvin's offer to take a picture, Darnell asks to go to McDonald's for French fries, and Namond cranks up hip-hop on the radio over Colvin's protestations.
So yeah, it's it all starts off rather friendly. They all seem very excited, like you say. It's interesting that Colvin elects to take them to a really fancy place straight off the bat.
Yeah.
You'd think he might go somewhere a little bit more, just like a standard mid-range restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, Naaman's brief was steak, wasn't it? But I'm sure there are other options available.
But I think he took them a bit too far out of their comfort zone on this occasion.
I think he's getting a little bit won over by the whole academic side of this study they've got going on, and if you really do want to put these kids through their paces with regard to this study, perhaps it is good to sort of test the extremes here. And
Yeah,
Colvin
I suppose so.
does seem to enjoy, as bad as it is in some ways, he does seem to enjoy this, the way he smiles at the lesson the kids are learning here at the table, sort of suggests that this was part of his plan, really, as this gift.
And then once inside, it's all very uncomfortable. Like, they don't even trust people to take their coat.
Yeah.
It becomes a little bit reminiscent of D'Angelo's dinner from season 1. Again, another season 1 callback.
It's crazy, isn't it?
We're seeing, quite frankly, it is. I mean, it's not. The camera's not really pointing at them in that way, but it's. You can see in the foreground and the background, the other people sat around. They are mainly sort of white businessmen and women, and is trying to. There is that sort of racial reminder, I suppose.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, we've certainly been through this scene before. Obviously, the difference here is there's obviously a more youthful and inexperienced take on it from these three school children, and yeah, just really stepping into this culture that's outside their own. And D'Angelo was more challenging of things. He felt a bit more confident to challenge this different culture, whereas the three kids are actually rather really intimidated by this. And yeah, the idea that someone's going to take your property for a little while, the trustful taking of your property, the Coates, is a bit of an interesting idea. And they find so many ways to underline the differences, with that being just one of them. The idea of this difference between the hostess and the waitress, and being overwhelmed with the pretentious foodie vocab, and not knowing how to react to fit in this environment, not knowing which drink is an acceptable drink to order until sort of Colvin steps up with the 4 Cokes. So it's a real sort of whirlwind of different things being thrown at them.
Yeah, it's it all comes very, very thick and fast, and I think the key part of it that he comes to talk about later, which I guess we'll cover in the next section, is how they don't really know how to try and enjoy the experience. They don't really know how. They can't really admit who they are in that sense. They don't want to. They don't want to let that that facade slip.
Yeah.
They've got a save face. It's interesting that in the car, Namond is talking about flipping it and tricking people into thinking that he's less ghetto than he is, or whatever. But when it comes to later on, for example, that kind of subversion seemed funny in the car, but it's actually quite dark when you think about it in retrospect. It's like this desire, is a desire to be downtrodden. They kind of have to be pushed down, and they're going to go to prison. They know that they're going to die or whatever in 10 years' time, just as like with that little test that they did earlier. So it's sort of funny at first, and then quickly becomes very tragic. Yeah,
Just this lack of confidence, isn't it? It's very scary, and just the silence of the scene is very stark as well, really, isn't it? The way everything's communicated through these facial expressions, and Colvin's smile being particularly telling, as he kind of enjoys their discomfort. He's loving opening up this world to these kids, and Naaman's hopeless head shake as he's finally finished hearing the menu is pretty hilarious. Just contemplating this, how expansive the world is, really. Yeah, it's really great to see all that. Also, I guess this is the only scene in the whole show where we see the real entertainment heart of the city, the place, you come to as an average tourist or for a night out, I guess, the inner harbour. It's the sort of the entertainment centre of the city. I guess you wouldn't come here if you're a Wire fan. You'd probably take the show tour as a preference. But yeah, it's cool to see that. This is kind of the picture postcard Baltimore right here.
So now that we're here, I don't know if you want to more directly address Damon's email.
Yeah.
And whether or not, I mean, did you think that there was a somewhat vague change in their attitude?
I think that...
Do you think it sort of suddenly became a bit too awkward?
The more you think about it, actually, the more of a point Damon has, because I think the show goes through a lot of... the show makes it quite clear, really, that there is a big change, particularly with the way the music contrast beforehand. The way Naaman is so accepting and complimentary of the music, and then all of a sudden becomes very defiant. And yeah, it does. There is a real stark contrast there. And yeah, I guess there could be a number of reasons for it. I guess they finally have that breathing space again. Not that they're inherently obnoxious people at all, but they're used to their banter, as a lot of a lot of kids are, and they felt far too much social pressure of a new kind to dare try it here. And I guess there's also an element of anger there. I guess their expectations versus the reality, and things just weren't as enjoyable as they'd hoped. So everything, when they were discussing it in class, they were so excited for it, and now they're just, they're having to vent that frustration a little bit and take it out on those around them. Yeah, and I guess for Colvin, it's a bit of a lesson in terms of reminding him how temporary that surreal impact of the restaurant was. It's not really going to do much to change them, but in the moment, it's fascinating.
Yeah. I guess there's I don't know if this is a bit of a pop psychology look at it, but I suppose you could see that having entered this discomfort, they feel the need to reclaim their familiarity again, to kind of get back to that world that they know, and to some extent that comes with stamping out your authority and, making people know who you are, and, Naaman putting that music on and cranking it up, like he wants to feel like he's back in his world again. Once they're out of that zone, they feel free to be who they think they are again, to kind of to be able to save face in that way.
Oh, definitely.
But it's all a rather tragic cover up to who they really are, which is what we see.
Yes, certainly. So I think that all those reasons are very, very legitimate, justifications for what happens there. And it's just a real sort of building up of restraint, I guess, in that restaurant, and finally having the chance to sort of come back down to earth, what they know. Also worth mentioning on the Damon front that Damon did email in last week with another reference to this section about
that's right.
Damon's wife's cousin, who recently got married in the hotel which the steakhouse is part of. I'm not sure if the Ruth's Chris Steakhouse is a famous Baltimore thing, or whether it's sort of a standard upscale restaurant chain or anything like that. I don't know if it's good to get some clarification on that from the viewers, from the listeners, but just thought it'd be worth mentioning Damon's other contribution on this scene.
Well, a quick Google search reveals that it's a chain of 136 steakhouses across the United States and in several international locations.
Wow.
So
I've got to say,
it has some kind of tagline that says the best USDA prime steak available or something.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Whatever.
Okay, so it's quite a chain.
Never heard of it.
I've got to say that the interior and the atmosphere and everything didn't quite match up with the. You only see that the front of the restaurant. I'm not sure if it connected. But yeah, maybe that's just the Ruth's Chris Steakhouse way.
I guess it's perhaps popular in certain parts of America more than others, or maybe it's some really famous thing. I don't know. Don't think we have any here.
No, I haven't seen any here. Okay, so do you want to go to the final little section for the pilot class, just to sort of debrief the next day?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so the next day, Colvin discusses the experience with Dr. Parenti. He tells them that the students were capable of behaving well and enjoying something new, but reverted to their corner kid ways without even realizing it once they felt stifled. Parenti notes that this lack of self-awareness on the kids' part is a barrier to future progress. Colvin then sees the group boasting to the rest of the students that the dinner was amazing.
So yeah, kind of as we've already said, really, like they've just come back and they don't want to appear like they made a fool of themselves, or that it was awkward, or that they weren't able to handle it. You know, people are watching you, people are judging you. They need to know if you're weak or you're strong, and they come back and they're strong. We had a great time. I owned it. I was the king. I did this. You know, keeping up that facade.
Yeah, you got to ensure the rest of the class stays jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting how Colvin is cottoning on to Parenti's academic terminology. He seems to throw in a few of his own as he reports on the evening. I'm sure Parenti's very much a little bit depressed that he missed out on this sort of first-hand study, but it really would have ruined the vibe if Parenti was sat around the table as well, writing on his little notepad. So perhaps best to just hear it second-hand from Bunny.
Yeah, I suppose him sort of bringing in some of that academic terminology means that the deacon was right, and that Colvin is capable of, going to head-to-head with any of these academic types.
Yeah. Yeah, he always seemed to have more of the know-how, not necessarily the terminology to describe it, but he seemed to have more of an instinct for it, and now he's catching up on the whole terminology front as well. So, yeah, it's clearly learning from Parenti as much as he is from the kids here. Okay.
All right, well, that's about all I have for that bit. So.
Yep, same. All right, let's quickly do a very short strand on Kima, just the one section. So Kima's surprised and delighted to find how well working overtime in homicide pays. She goes to her old apartment to visit her ex-girlfriend Cheryl and their son Elijah, and pays overdue child support. Kima hopes they can get back together, but just then, Cheryl's new partner, a law student named Nancy, appears. Kima exits and Cheryl has Elijah wave goodbye to Aunt Kima.
Alright, so we're starting off with Greg's improved paycheck. I suppose she's not used to this, all the overtime. Lester having a little bit of a play on words about cases being black, being in the black, I suppose, to be, in profit.
Yeah, they go red, green, and then black. That's it, yeah. So it's...
And so there's that little bit there, really. And then it moves on to the old apartment. She visits Cheryl. It's nice that when the... is it Nancine?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Nancy
when she comes
Nancine.
in, Kima kind of makes that joke about guys being able to pass the bar.
Yeah.
Which is actually quite funny, actually. It's quite a nice play on words. Cheryl seems to be the only person that gets it, though.
Yeah, I don't think Nancy quite...
Even with the certain connection there.
Yeah, even with the clarification, I'm not sure Nancy quite gets it, does she?
But what's not so funny is that I think Kima comes to realise that she's been forgotten, essentially.
Yeah.
She's been left behind. She went and disappeared off, so Cheryl went and did her own thing and looked after Elijah.
Yeah, typical why everything Kima hoped to achieve through this moment here is crumbling. So I guess...
Do you reckon she'll keep those payments up?
It's hard to say now, isn't it? It really is. I mean, the motivation has just gone at this point, you'd have thought, but particularly that drooping face as the door is opening is like fabulously done on Cheryl's part. And yet another step parent who's not wanted. I guess we can kind of draw a parallel with Michael and Michael's stepdad as we catch up again with Kima here.
Yeah, broken families.
Yeah, and obviously she's got her life on track more now. Homicide seems to have left her with more to structure her life and career around, so there's more work, less bumming around with ever-decreasing targets of importance, and lots of waiting around at the MCU. And, also a sense that she really does want to get back together, I think. There was certainly a sort of subtext of that. And, yeah, it's just destroyed in a conveniently horrible way as Nancine comes home from work at just the right time. And the fact that Nancine actually makes her contributions a bit of a triviality, because, law money is coming into Cheryl's family now.
Yeah.
So, all of a sudden, all of what she hoped to provide here is suddenly no longer welcome in every way possible.
It's all shot down in an instant.
And, the final line comes from Elijah himself, as there's just no sense of recognition whatsoever. But does Kima deserve it? You know, it's easy to sympathise with Kima here, but, you know, we've got to remember that she did kind of just abandon Cheryl in many ways without an explanation.
I mean, we know that she may have done the work in the interim, but Cheryl wouldn't have known that.
Yeah.
As far as she's concerned, she just kind of got up and left. That was kind of it, really.
Yeah, so, I can totally see from both perspectives.
Or was certainly put her out because she wasn't putting any time in.
Yeah.
But yeah. Alright, so that's about it for Kima.
Yep. Alright, so we're going to go and see the Stanfield organisation. So there's a fair bit of this. There's 3 sections this week. So Prop Joe informs Marlo that Herc is now working for major crimes and mentions that they were the same unit that brought down Avon and Stringer. He advises Marlo, who's been discarding his cell phones regularly, to quit using them entirely. Marlo and Chris immediately toss one of their phones out of the SUV. Chris, Partlow and Snoop have successfully driven off the New York dealers. Chris has learned that Omar has been transferred from the city jail. Marlo informs him that the charges against Omar have been dropped. Since Oldface Andre has closed shop, Marlo and Chris deduce that he gave testimony and went into hiding. Finding Andre is now their top priority. Chris and Snoop break into Andre's house and threaten his girlfriend, who swears she does not know his whereabouts. Marlo's soldiers believe her and decide not to kill her.
Okay, so starting off with our little meeting with Prop Joe and Marlo, returning the card, sort of completing that little element that we had from last week. Obviously, he's aware of the major crimes unit and knows about what happened to Avon and Stringer. Yeah, I suppose Prop Joe here is looking out for Marlo. It is kind of nice, I suppose, here as well that he passes on the accomplishments of the earlier detail. In a way, it's actually nice to hear a bit of praise for what the detail achieved. Kind of talking about the fact that they managed to be on his phones even though he was constantly changing these burners, and it's almost like it's a compliment from Prop Joe.
Yeah, it really is, certainly, and they certainly did a good job of scaring Prop. And of course there is an irony to this conversation that we know what the department has become since, so all these fears are actually misplaced, really. It is quite incredible that the stuff that he's found is open to the public. Also incredible that Prop has the initiative to find that info and make an intelligent interpretation of it. Although, is it actually open to the public? Because Joe would not want, Joe would want to keep his links to the courthouse under wraps, right? So if he's actually getting that stuff through his leak in the courthouse, that might just be a way of covering for it, just saying, it's publicly available info. But then again, knowing what the statements the show wants to make about the city and government, maybe it is the case that they are publicly viewable, and therefore Prop's intelligence is just making a mockery of the system.
I suppose so, yeah. So yeah, kind of a little catch-up between the two of them there, and see a slight change in their operations immediately as Marlo and Chris throw their phones out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the end of that. They move on to a new means of communicating.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it?
Which ends up with this strange clock system that they have.
Oh, of course, yeah, that does come up later on, doesn't it? That's weird, I forgot about that. It's odd that Prop Joe waited so long to tell them about the burner rule that he's followed for a year, he says. I guess it makes it clear that Prop likes to wait for his moment to make these big, impactful impressions on Marlo to try and win him over. So much of what he does as part of this co-op service is really just sort of theatre, just to demonstrate how much of a force he is to be reckoned with on the street.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, he wants to be able to sweep in at the right moment and be people's guardian angel or nightmare or whatever. He kind of, like you say, he wants to have that impact, and theatrical is the right term, I think. He is trying to big himself up in the way that he times his delivery of all these lessons.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, there's, as you say, there's that really classic Marlo efficiency, as the phone just goes out the window without a word spoken. And
one for sentiment.
Yeah. And of course we see that these two kingpins being driven around, doing the patrol style rendezvous through the passenger side windows, and not getting it wrong like Fitzhugh would. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Marlo probably feels a bit emasculated at these moments where Prop Joe is just totally, owning him at running the streets, as it were. And perhaps this is the thing that drives his ambition to eventually outdo him. The tragic results as he does eventually overturn the co-op in his favour. So you do have to wonder how much Prop Joe has to do with his own demise.
Yeah, it gives out a little bit too much information, maybe.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to. He ends up putting him on a slightly more even pegging, which Marlo being able to take the initiative and haul himself up and over.
And then Marlo makes...
I suppose then...
What's that, sorry?
I was going to say, then we move on to the next bit that you mentioned with Chris and Snoop.
Is that everything? Yep, I think so. Yes, let's move on to the bit with the girlfriend of Andre.
Well, because you already did the recap.
That's
for that
right.
bit,
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
you? Yeah. So yeah, we suppose we started off with that little conversation between Marlo and Chris, where he's talking about. Oh, see, I felt like I missed something here as well. How does Marlo know that the charges against Omar have been dropped?
He doesn't.
How does he know that?
It's a rash assumption, a scarily rash assumption, really. But in typical Stanfield style, I think there's this real culture of caution. And I like the way that the hit is put out. It's a classic, subtle Stanfield way of doing it. You never mention the fact that it's going to be a hit. It's just a problem. A new problem has arisen. And Chris is just like, oh, I'm on it.
Job number one.
I'm on it. So, yeah, it's problem number one now, he says, doesn't he? So, yeah. And I like how...
Yeah, Andre is put in the crosshairs.
Definitely, yep. Sorry, Andre. Days are numbered. And I like how Chris refers to their New York success as the fashions are sweeping changes across the streets here. No more Yankee caps, even from the Baltimore dealers, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they've got the fear, that's for sure.
Definitely. And then what did you think of the actual scene where they finally break into this bedroom at night, this crazily intrusive hold-up that they go for? Very intense.
Yeah, it's very intense, yeah. Yeah, they're sort of rushing up the stairs in that darkness, and I do like the fact that they always come out of the shadows. They're very, very menacing, the pair of them. Snoop just, this time, seems to be there to, answer Chris's questions. It almost seems a bit purposefully rehearsed.
To me, it was this weird...
And good performance by the girlfriend as well, I thought.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Yeah, she was absolutely petrified.
Convincing terror.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah, as you were saying, that there's this sort of weird division of labour. So Chris is the proficient soldier here, and then Snoop seems to be the proficient psychoanalyst or people reader. She seems to know if someone's lying or not, or seems to have the judgment assumed over Chris, which is odd, I thought, but certainly fascinating.
Yeah, rushing up those stairs and busting in, and it's pretty brutal.
Certainly.
But like you say, it's just that efficiency, getting the job done, in and out.
Yeah, and of course there's the as was the case last week with the fake New York dealer. There's these moments of restraint where they don't actually end up killing someone. And I always wonder whether they're fueled by wanting to not leave any possible complications, or maybe through a genuine small ounce of humanity that's left in Chris and Snoop. And the idea that they've mostly adapted the game to its corrupt, inhumane endpoint, but like there's that little small shred of empathy left that they're still occasionally engaging with. It's an interesting idea. So, yeah, it is nice that occasionally they do leave someone alive. Thank God. So.
Yeah, it's a rare occasion, so she's very fortunate.
All right, anything else on that?
So, I think that's about it that I've got for that bit.
Okay, so Andre, unaware of Marlo's membership in Prop Joe's co-op, has gone over to East Baltimore to ask Prop Joe to help him leave town until he is safe from Marlo's wrath. Prop Joe offers him $2,000 and a ride to a northern city in exchange for Andre's convenience store. Andre says this is undervalued, but Prop Joe points out that Andre is not in a position to bargain. Later, Marlo pays Prop Joe for his package. He expects a discount for dealing with the New York threat, but Joe claims that this has already been factored into the cost. Joe, however, indicates to Marlo that something that you want is about to be returned at no cost.
Right, so yes, Andre is given a little bit of a lesson. This is another little burn, I think, from Prop Joe, talking about him just not being worth saving, essentially. He's just not really enough use to warrant all of the fuss, and he's not certainly not going to spend that kind of money to make sure that he's okay. And of course, there's something to be said for strengthening the co-op with Marlo, because he knows that this is something that he wants. Also worth noting is, I don't know if you noticed, there's "Don't Leave Me This Way" playing in the background in the shop.
Okay. Very nice.
Which I thought was a nice touch. Bit of use of diegetic music to add a extra layer to the background.
Yeah, sweet. No, it's a really, really good scene. Nice to see Prop Joe back in his junk shop. Not too often have we seen him in this position, apart from, I think, Season 2 when Sergei paid a few visits. Yeah, Prop Joe, I think, makes it pretty clear that he knows of Marlo. He instantly stops screwing that nail when he hears his name mentioned from Andre. So we sense it's like he's lucky that it was Andre chatting to him who didn't really pick up on this tell. If it was, perhaps switched over to someone like Omar or Marlo, they'd have instantly picked up on that. It wasn't particularly well poker-faced from the looks of it. We've never seen ties with Andre and Joe before, so it's a little bit strange perhaps how the show is just almost too fast-paced that all of these coincidences seem kind of okay. Just the way it came across in the recap, Andre, who is unaware of Marlo's membership in Prop Joe's co-op, goes to see Prop Joe. It's like, so you happen to go to the guy who is going to be able to screw you over. Not to say that Prop Joe is kind of this oracle and almost a myth of the other side of town. But yeah, it's just worth mentioning that there are quite a few coincidences in the show sometimes.
That or there's just a whole element of presumed scenes that we couldn't see for the sake of runtime.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. Practically.
Maybe I guess it's not totally unreasonable that he might have heard of him and found a way to get to him.
Practically anyone else would not have had a stake in Marlo's interests in the way Prop Joe does. So, yeah, it is a bit of a shame for Andre, but I guess there's an inevitability for it.
All right, and then
I guess there is.
Did we have the bit with Marlo as well, with the way he pays him for the package?
That's right. Yeah, that's coming up very shortly. I guess we'll just quickly mention that there is the epigraph here, isn't there? I'm sure we'll get to that shortly.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And let's quickly get on to. So there's the bit with Marlo included in this actually. Oh yeah, there is the bit with Marlo. You're right. Sorry. Yeah. Yep. Please do tell.
So yeah, we had the bit where he pays him for the package. We see that Prop Joe is using this as a good opportunity to strengthen those relationships and enforce the idea of the co-op. And he's going to absolutely screw over old face Andre here and turn him over to Marlo, which I suppose leads us on to our final little bit where he's picked up by Slim.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, Prop Joe. Yeah, really laying on, as we were saying before, those co-op perks, and just these two, Slim and Prop, they're an absolute joy to watch. That's two of my real favourites, I think. It's partly because they're used so sparingly, really, and it means each of their sort of wisdom nuggets packs a much larger punch. Because the two of them in tandem here are just sort of, mesmerising almost. Just the way that they strategize stuff in the street. It's very, very impressive. Okay.
Move on to the last bit.
Yeah, last bit. Very, very quick. So Slim Charles picks up Andre, but instead of escorting him out of town, he stops at the vacant houses. Chris and Snoop are there with their lineman sheeting. Andre begs Chris to shoot him in a place where his family will find him, but Chris insists that here is good, loads his pistol, and walks Andre up to one of the houses.
And that's the end of Andre. Kind of talks about, what is it, he wants to be somewhere where his peoples will find him, or something.
Yeah.
Whoever these peoples are.
There's got to be an element
not
of...
entirely clear.
Yeah. There's got to be some sort of remembrance here. And that's...
he mentions his family, of course, but...
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously got that girlfriend that we've just met, which does add an element of tragedy to that comment. I guess we can now sort of have a bit more of a stake in that. And just reminds us...
It's interesting that he does completely accept it, though. He doesn't try and fight. He's not like, oh no, don't do this. It's just like, okay, well, we were doing this, but let's try and do it this way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true, actually, isn't it? It's sort of this really shallow bargaining position he's got. Yeah, it's really tragic, and a real reminder of how awfully stark this method they've got of these vacant murders, and how it really doesn't leave a trace, which is good in some ways, but in other ways it really is horrible for the families here.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, Andre is not really the most sympathetic a character, but doesn't mean that he's not leaving people behind.
Yeah, awful stuff. And I love, as always, a classic Chris trait, really, reminding Andre of the Marlo Code. We're going to keep it quick, there's going to be no pain, but you have to go, this is an inevitability. And it's just this kind of murder alongside bedside manner that Chris seems to nail perfectly.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I don't have any more for that bit.
Okay, so we're going to do one little bit with Michael, just the one section. So Michael continues to be disturbed by the return of Bug's father. He shoos Bug from the room when the man enters and refuses to be touched by him in any way. Michael asks Randy and Dookie what will happen if he calls social services. Randy says they will split him and his brother up and put them in group homes, and won't simply take away Michael's stepdad like he wants. Out of options to protect his brother, Michael is escorted by Dookie to Marlo's courtyard, and is allowed to enter. Hoping to find Chris, he instead addresses Marlo face to face, telling him that I got a problem I can't bring to anyone else.
And starting with rather sinister scene with Michael's father, just bringing out a little bit more of that, what's being unsaid, that subtext. Michael ends up having to ask his friends about the situation. And it's interesting that little bit before he goes out and asks them about social services, we see that he was clearly lying about the DSS card, because earlier he says, oh, there's no money left on this month's check anyway, but we clearly see him getting money out of the machine with that card.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's kind of, again, a nice little subtle nod to the fact that he was lying about that in order to retain control of the card. Probably taking the remainder of the money out.
Yeah, he's really trying to keep the family alive, I guess, with some sort of breadline. And I guess the first scene is back in the house, isn't it? And amongst this disturbance, as the recap puts it, there's the second appearance of a plaster of Paris volcano, as made by a school kid. Oddly enough, in both instances, the first one's with McNulty and his kids, and especially in this one, they're used to prepare us for some sort of impending disaster. And I like how the stepdad is right in the centre of the shot, atop the volcano's peak. So he's sort of, I guess he's in the firing line, really. He might be the cause of this disturbance, but he's also going to get done in a really awful way. Disaster's really impending for him more than anyone else.
Yep. And it's kind of nice that Michael ends up asking Randy and Dookie about this, because they would know, kind of know about social services and whatnot. So obviously, Randy is quick to warn of the group home route.
Yeah, it's a really nice, warm chat, that, isn't it? There's like a real sort of friendship shared there.
But we also see the pressure that Michael is under and the stress that is causing him. Doesn't really know who to turn to anymore, and nobody's really presenting him with answers, and he can't figure everything out for himself. He is still only a kid.
Yeah. Michael
And we
describing.
end up with going to the courtyard itself with Marlo.
Yeah, just a tragic, just sort of running out of options, no bargaining moments really, and describing Cutty as too friendly. I know some viewers have described that as odd, but I think you can really see it from his perspective what he means. He's just not very receptive to acts of kindness without selfish intentions. I guess, and since there's no obvious incentive there for Cutty, I guess it leaves Michael really second guessing him. And also, his stepdad's kind of visually similar to Cutty in a little way. I don't know if you agree with that, but it's a little bit like when Dookie was really confused with Prez's voluntary acts of kindness in the beginning. He just sort of had that really confused look on his face. He was like, "Why are you doing this for me?" It's just this kind of idea of, if I don't know why you're doing this, I assume that you might have less than savoury intentions here. Yeah, so he just goes looking for FaceTime with the Marlo, the boy Marlo.
Well, he goes looking for Chris, but he finds Marlo.
Yeah, and he's not really given a choice, is he? He said, whatever you want to say to Chris, you're going to have to say it to me.
Well, even before that, we have him sort of entering the courtyard itself with Dookie, and he's sort of leaving him behind, and you get a sense that he knows that he's introducing himself to a much darker world, and that there's no turning back. He kind of looks back to Dookie as he walks down towards the courtyard, and he knows that there is, to some extent, that world, that childish world, is being left behind him. He is moving on. He's involving himself with, the kingpin. So
yeah, and that's
he's entering different territory now.
It's punctuated really nicely by Omar, isn't it? As he oversees this moment of transition.
He's just a kid.
That's right. Yeah.
Not for much longer.
Yeah, that's also the last line that's ever spoken to Marlo on the show. And it's spoken to him by Vincent when he steps into the rim shop to rob the stash at the end, sort of around the time of the final montage.
Oh yeah, you're just a kid, and that's just a
exactly. Yeah. So I love that callback. It's one of the more subtle ones, and obviously one use of it is dismissive of his age. In this case, Omar, and then the later use is disbelief at his age for what he's actually just doing here. Yeah. So really, really, really nice progression.
Now, I don't know about you, but this is a kind of moral greyness to the max scene for me with Michael and Marlo. Like, I actually felt a tiny bit of strange respect for Marlo here, even though it's incredibly hard to justify. I understand. Like, Michael genuinely has nowhere else to turn. He knows that, he's bringing himself into this more sinister situation. Obviously, Marlo understands a certain amount about his character and how much he values his independence. But it obviously, Michael doesn't owe him anything, and yet he's still willing to go out of his way to help this kid who has no other options. It's hard to justify, I know, but I just, in that moment, for some strange reason, like how when we have Marimo and Herc in the same room, when they're with other people, they're just giant arseholes, and you're like, what the hell are you doing? But when they're together in the same room, you actually have respect for Marimo and him as the leader, and Herc messing up. And here, I kind of had a similar dissonance within me in terms of my feelings towards them. Like, obviously Marlo is Marlo, but I don't know. He's kind of taking a step in order to help out this kid who's run out of options.
Yeah, obviously I'm pretty sure if they didn't think Michael was an asset or potential asset,
that's obviously underpinning it. Yeah.
So I really feel like if it was another kid, I don't think he'd have even been respected with that FaceTime. I think they'd have instantly dismissed him. And obviously once...
I'm not saying that obviously his intentions aren't there. He has his intentions with Michael for sure, but just watching that scene, for some reason, I just felt that way about it.
Yeah, no, I certainly see what you mean. That there is an element of sort of street care about it. Like is this emergence.
I think more than anything, it was just Michael's desperation. That's kind of what really got it for me. Because Marlo is the one responding to that, despite his intention. Although he is the one, he is still the one responding to that desperation. Yeah. We see the difficulty of Michael's situation. So I did feel a bit strangely about the whole thing towards Marlo.
It's not only sympathetic here. Yeah. Yeah, I totally see what you mean by that. I mean, there's clearly, it's almost like a delayed payment later on. Once we've done this for you, there's no way you're not going to be very indebted to us. Maybe you didn't take our $200 earlier when we were doing the handouts, but now you're going to have something for which you're going to have to pay us back. And of course, he's very quickly...
Well, not only does he have the money that was given to him by Chris, now he's got this massive favour of having his dad taken out of the picture, or at least will do soon.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why now he's in very deep.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we see, I mean, he instantly pretty much becomes involved with their gang. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Maybe just worth mentioning quickly about the stepdad again. He does that thing of being deceptively sort of reasonable in the scenes where we see him, leaving only Michael's disgust and sort of disregard to communicate the history and the horrors. So clearly whatever happened is sort of well beyond the realm of forgiveness here. But that there is...
Yeah.
It's not trying too hard to really lay on thickly that this is a horrible man. It's using kind of Michael to fill that in for us, which is quite nice.
I think generally speaking, when you have a TV show that is telling rather than showing, when it comes to some aspect of the story, it can get quite frustrating.
Yeah.
But here, because of the character of Michael and the performance, it doesn't really come across as frustrating. It's just intriguing and lends a certain mystique to his character.
Totally agree. Yeah. All right, and with that, should we have a final strand?
Yeah.
Just a couple of sections.
This must be the Omar.
That's
bits.
right. A couple of sections with Omar here. So, Omar is released from the county jail he'd been transferred to. Bunk is waiting for him and feels that Omar is insufficiently grateful. He extracts from Omar a promise to never kill again. Bunk offers a ride to the train station, but Omar insists on staying in town because he doesn't know anything else besides Baltimore.
Yeah, he's manages to get out here. I think Bunk is right to feel a little bit put upon, like he's not exactly thanking him too hard. Yeah, I like the way that as he demands this, no more bodies from you, he's almost brandishing his cigar as a weapon in his hand. It's almost like an extension of his fist.
And it really is such a bold thing, like for Bunk to grab Omar by the scruff of his neck and threaten him right here, like. He's so convinced Omar runs by this street code. He's got no reason to be scared whatsoever of doing this to such a street legend. This sort of crazy killer of the streets. When you sort of step back and think about that for a second, it really is quite a bold moment from Bunk here.
Yeah, and Omar talks about, obviously, he declines a ride to the train station. Talks about a man's got to live what he know, which kind of reminds me of Andre later on, where he's talking about he doesn't know anybody outside of Baltimore. He doesn't, he wants to be somewhere where he knows.
Yeah, I think there's also an implied quip back at Bunk there, saying, I want to stay in Baltimore, but I also want to carry on doing what I've always done, robbing and killing drug dealers. So it's not letting him have the last laugh by any means, I don't think. And yeah, I mean, fair enough that Bunk's getting annoyed with Omar for not showing enough respect, but Omar was sort of trying to be, I mean, he didn't apologise, but he did, or thank him, he did try and be somewhat helpful, I think, didn't he? Try and at least assist him in the investigation to try and work out who it was that may have shot Andre. Yeah. Oh well, I can understand from Bunk's perspective.
Yeah.
And it's worth mentioning, of course, there's that epically thick blanket of snow as well, with the winter coming, and the boys of summer no more.
I do like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it gets us back in that...
Reminding us of those seasons.
Yeah, there's season 2 mood almost there. They have the biting cold winter on the harbour. Alright, so...
Alright, what's the next Omar bit then?
Final section of the show this week. So Omar and Ronaldo wait in a car in front of Andre's store, with Omar assuring his boyfriend that he intends to keep his promise to Bunk but that merely threatening Andre with a gun should be fair game. When it's clear Andre is not present, having gone to see Prop Joe, they leave. Omar and Ronaldo end up staking out the public square where Marlo spends much of his time in the hope of catching sight of him, whom they only know by name and not face. They recognise him from the card game they robbed, and realise why Omar was framed. Ronaldo is concerned when he notices Marlo meeting with Michael, but Omar dismisses Michael as just a kid.
Right, so yeah, they're sitting outside Andre's store. Obviously, Omar is straight back in. I mean, I suppose he doesn't have to, as he said before, he doesn't have to actually kill the guy or anything, but still thinks that he's got some answers for him. But it is telling that he's straight back onto the street, straight back into getting things straight, putting a gun in people's face.
Yeah, he's still
or at least
ruling
that's
out
what he plans
murder.
to do anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so 3 men on the lookout for Andre now, so including Ronaldo, and obviously Marlo's up there as well. And I think Ronaldo's been absent for quite a while, hasn't he, really? But he's back here, and he seems to be more proficient than Dante was. And yeah, just cool to see them running around again. He's out of prison after a fairly short stint. And yeah, just odd to see how Omar catches up to the word on the street quite a few weeks behind schedule here. It's kind of weird to see him not knowing of Marlo, and then only connecting the dots once he sees his face and, you know, thinks back to the card game and realises Prop Joe actually put him in on that to gain leverage over Marlo, and then he finally catches up with the rest of us, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, he finally realises what took place, obviously sees them at the courtyard. It's nice that he says, "No wonder the boy don't like me."
Yeah.
Obviously, you remind him if he remembers that poker game.
Yeah. So all that confusion and frustration following his arrest is now, you know, peacefully understood to him, I guess. And yeah, there's a really nice sort of crossover with Michael's strand here at the end as well to finish off, as we've discussed.
Yeah, that's right.
With the
We've
final
already
line of the
mentioned
episode.
Just a kid, the connection.
Yeah. Okay, anything more on the Omar, or should we move to our final sections?
No, I think that's about it for Omar and about it for our recap.
Okay.
You know what the problem with these here machines? They're too cheap to begin with. Some people think for what it's worth to fix it, make the shit work right, you might as well dump them. Get another. 2,000 and a free ride north for the store and its contents.
Store worth way more, Joe.
It depends, don't it?
So let's take a look at the title first. Then, Know Your Place. What did you think of this title?
Yep. So I guess most directly, I'm thinking of the restaurant scene. Dining at, obviously the fancy restaurant, which Colvin worries will stop them from achieving in the world. And, I guess Prez as well is kind of defying the system here and opting to teach them off the course, but really he needs to know his place if he actually wants to stay in this career, as is being ingrained to him, particularly by Miss Sampson here. And the rest of it, I think. Also, Carcetti struggling with his political quarrels in his first few meetings here, and despite this sort of assumed sense of authority he'd actually have as the mayor, he's finding very quickly that his plate is actually more of a balancer, a pair of scales between lots of conflicting interests across all sorts of political sort of bodies. So it's not at all what he expected, and he needs to get into his place and know his place now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that in this episode, and I think I mentioned at the beginning that there is that work theme about people being ready to work. Naaman obviously starting work needs to know his place.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few instances. I think there's Carcetti reminding Campbell of to know her place. He's the mayor, he's the one making these decisions. Prop Joe to Andre, telling him about he's not in a position to bargain even. So he's talking about him essentially not being worth saving. And we have Bodhi Naaman, as I said. He's not. His father may have been in a sort of position of value, but that isn't the case anymore, and Naaman's going to have to work for it himself. Again, he should know his place. He's not able to just step up and do what he likes or have his mum come round and do the talking for him. And then I think there's also Norman to rules as well. We mind you asking. They don't want him to be pushed up too far. You know your place. You are not... maybe they can see his ambition there, and obviously he does want to be commissioner. He doesn't want to make that final step, but he's being held down a little bit. So and Prez as well. I hadn't actually thought of that one, but Prez is a good example too. About he should know his place as a teacher, but he actually doesn't. He does the opposite. Yeah, he tries to break out of that.
I think particularly for the rules example you mentioned, it's particularly important. I think this is the first time in the show he's actually had to know some sort of a limit to his power.
He's really the one that's not. He's really the one coming under the authority. Certainly.
What about the epigraph? Or would you like to do scenes?
Well, the epigraph that we have, we got Prop Joe. Might as well dump him and get another in his little speech to Andre about the things that people bring in to repair being, not even really worth repairing because they were too cheap to begin with. Obviously, he's talking about Old Face Andre, as we've already discussed. Did you think that it tied in anywhere else in the episode?
I like to think it was a little double entendre. So obviously there's the literal meaning of it's more cost effective to buy a new one than pay for expensive repairs. And then obviously that can apply to Andre. And the fact that he says it to his face is again another idea of he's sort of challenging his intelligence, as it were, and perhaps Andre, in your predicament, it's better to just let me hand you over and kill you now, get it over, rather than let Marlo elongate your misery, because you're dying. You might not know it, but you might as well let it get out your way. So I like to think there's sort of two meanings to it there.
Yeah. I suppose there is that train of thought that we heard from the police officers on the beat when Carcetti was going around, doing his ride-alongs. And they were talking about the city itself and about how it wasn't really worth repairing. How do we fix the city, or what can we do about it? Oh, just, firebomb it, just get rid of it, dump it. It's no good. We need to get another one, need to start again from scratch. Well, it's kind of like a continuation of that idea, maybe.
Yeah, that's certainly true. It works in that context, yeah.
Is there any particular scene standing out for you in this episode?
Yeah, obviously I think the restaurant scene, sort of following on from the D'Angelo one, is an often quoted scene. I do know a couple of people that it's sort of their favourite scene in the whole show. I think...
Bold.
What's that, sorry?
It's bold.
Yeah, I know, right?
To say it's the favourite scene in the whole show. I mean, fair enough. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but...
no,
it's an interesting choice.
It's a good scene, certainly. And perhaps from sort of a psychological perspective, you could kind of perhaps see it like that.
Clinically speaking.
There we go. Go with the Parenti version of events. I think as I mentioned before, anything with Prop Joe and Slim sort of bouncing off each other as they discuss wisdom nuggets is always really, really great stuff to hear. And they always sort of impress us with their intelligence and the way they handle business on the street. So I love the moments, the short moments we have with those two, as they sort of manipulate a business between Marlo and Andre. And then the scene with Daniels and Rhonda, for all its flaws, it's a unique scene and very uplifting in many ways, kind of sad in a few ways. But yeah, it's certainly enough of a standout to be mentioned here.
Yeah, I aside from the dinner scene, and you also already mentioned the sort of most optimistic scene in The Wire that it seems like to me with
definitely
the Perlman and Daniels. Another great scene for me was also in the politics section where the meeting with the city leaders with Carcetti, I did really like that as well, and seeing a little bit more of the reality behind the mayoral position. Obviously, we've seen all of the campaigning and we've seen all of the sort of press-related stuff. Now we get to see some of the actual job proper, some of the difficulties they have to deal with, and all the budgetary considerations, and all of this talk about building something with his name on it. You know, we're seeing a little bit more behind the scenes, and I thought it was good to see Carcetti have to deal with that actual situation and deal with people being difficult with him like Nerys Campbell, and it's good to see that he has still got the chops to hold his own. He's not completely useless. He's definitely learnt a thing or two, and he's lucky to have someone like Norman covering for him at the same time.
Absolutely.
So I definitely enjoyed those scenes with the meetings. Alrighty. Anything else you want to add about Know Your Place?
No, I think we've pretty much been through everything there. It's a really good episode, actually. An odd number of references back to Season 1 for no particularly apparent reason, but it's good that we sort of spotted all of them. And yeah, just pushing things ever closer to our pretty depressing end of the show in 4 episodes' time, or end of the season at least.
So yeah, we will be coming to episode 10 next week. Misgivings.
Okay, Misgivings.
So yeah, we'll be jumping into that next week. As per usual, should be coming out next Friday, which will be the 31st. Or not the
30th.
31st.
Day before Halloween.
Yeah. Day before Halloween, that's right. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us again. And feel free to get in touch. Again, as usual, send us an email, caughtonthewire@gmail.com. If you've got any thoughts about what we picked up here today, or perhaps you could chime in if you disagreed with any of our responses, particularly to Damon's question about the diner scene, and if the diner scene is your favourite scene, then why? Definitely be interesting from hearing people on that. And there's the contact form on the website, along with all of the episodes available, where you can download them all, caughtonthewire.wordpress.com. And we will see you next week for our episode 10. Thanks very much. Goodbye.